Thanks for hanging around. Busy week, very busy week. First of our 2 weeks of deadline to get the Senate bills across the finish line and over to the House. I know the House is working on the same thing on their side. We worked today. Senator Kim David, our floor leader, is doing, I think, a pretty good job of keeping everybody on task and moving bills through. We will finish those up next week. We had our last appropriations meeting for this cycle yesterday, went till about 5:45 last night. And so we'll pick it back up on Monday, and I'm happy to answer any questions, any observations for the week. So Carmen, Sean.
I'm curious, are you seeing any trends in the legislation that's being heard coming through the chamber?
We're seeing a lot of bills that seem to deal with election law and how elections are conducted, which I find unusual because Oklahoma has such an amazing electoral system. We've got one of the best in the nations, and our secretary, election board secretary, Paul Xerox, has just done a remarkable job. I've known him for years, and we've got the state-of-the-art machines that tally our ballots. We've got security, as much security as you'd ever want. We expanded our absentee ballot program. There was some concern that there was going to be some fraud problems, and by allowing a picture of your photo ID, that would cause fraud. And the executive secretary will tell you there was no more or less fraud than we see every single cycle for decades. So it's surprising to me that we're trying to fix problems that we don't have in Oklahoma. It was brought up in the argument that, well, this is proactive, we just want to get ahead of it. There's nothing to get ahead of. I mean, this is something that we do really well in the state, and we have minimal voter fraud, and we need to look at not tightening up, but expanding and making it easier. There were a lot of people, a lot of constituents from both sides of the aisle that were very pleased with the changes that we made for purposes of the pandemic and the emergency, and wanted that to continue on. So I'm hopeful that some of those bills will get hearings and will be able to expand access.
Sean, did you?
Yeah, I forgot what it was.
No, I'm sorry.
In terms of Senate Democrat bills, are you satisfied with the number of those that have gotten heard and moved forward? Or what are your thoughts?
Well, obviously, I'd like every one of our bills to get a hearing. We've got some really good bills and some very conscientious members who are very engaged in their districts and have done a really good job of listening to their constituents. So I don't think you could, this isn't a party thing. I think you could ask the Republicans the same thing. Do you wish you were getting more of your bills heard? But yeah, I wish we were. I think that we've got a lot of really good things to say and a lot of constituent issues that are actually important to not just people in our district. That being said, I think the floor leader is doing the best she can, and I appreciate the fact that she is entertaining our bills and giving us the bills that we're getting. Just wish we had more.
I was a little bit curious about police reform and the lack of police reform or serious police reform after the protests in the summer that were not just here, but everywhere, or seemingly everywhere. But it doesn't really seem like the legislature's committed to doing anything on that.
I have some members that have put forth some bills. Some of them got hearings, some of them didn't. We've seen some bills come through and pass through and go over to the House that I'm concerned were perhaps not, what are you going to be limiting access to information or videos or just social media on things that might happen in the future based on situations we've seen across the country. So the access and the videos and as what you're asking about seems to be not as robust as I thought it was going to be. Now, that being said, I understand that there might be some bills coming over from the House, which might hopefully give us more of a balance on what we're addressing as far as reforms are concerned. Of course, the larger picture is criminal justice reform, and we honestly haven't seen as many bills as I anticipated this session on criminal justice reform either. So again, I hear there's some things coming over from the House, but it remains to be seen.
Gotcha.
What, if anything, are you hearing about the budget?
Let's see. Everything's fine. We've got more money than we thought we were going to. Nothing to see here. We'll be okay. But seriously, the biggest concern I have is when I hear last week that the speaker is producing and running bills to cut income tax and over a 5-year period reduce corporate tax to nothing, and you just have to ask yourself, why would we even consider such a dramatic policy shift in this state when we're still in a COVID pandemic? We're now seeing variations, and we don't know how that's going to affect us, if we're going to have surges. We are seeing oil and gas prices still very, very low, so that revenue stream is not dependable. We're seeing Medicaid expansion, which the state's on the hook for 140 to 160 million, whatever the amount is right now. So to say we don't need the income tax, we don't need the corporate tax and the corporate participation, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And you'll notice Democrats aren't pounding the table and asking for these huge tax increases. We're very much aware of the situation the state's in right now and the beating that people have taken for the last year with this virus. But even though we're not asking for an increase, decrease makes no sense whatsoever.
Does your caucus, have y'all discussed Medicaid managed care at all yet? Or do you have a position on that?
We've been doing our homework. We've had a lot of groups that have come to speak to us about their proposals and about how they see that working in the state, both for managed care and non-managed care groups. So we are in a fact-finding process. We still are, because there's so much information out there. Not being a part of the process early on, and it wasn't just our caucus, no one in the legislature, or a few of us in the legislature were part of those discussions. So we're having to play catch up. We didn't know what was going to be in the RFPs when they came out. We didn't know what the responses were. The governor honestly has never had much of a plan, and so that's made it even more difficult. So we're looking at everything. Our position is that we're going to make a decision that's based on information, that's based on facts, it's based on what it's going to cost the state. It's going to be based on how it's going to help the state and how the people of Oklahoma, and how it's going to help not only our constituents but the entire state as a whole.
It is overwhelming, the amount of information.
There's quite a bit. I think you're absolutely right, and I'm sure that you all, as members of the press, get just inundated with it as much as we do. But and to be candid, there's a lot to sift through. How much of this is factual, how much of it's just this is what we're hoping for, as opposed to this is what we think is going to happen. We want data that shows is real time. Show us how this is going to work and what it's going to cost. And we're having to sift through a whole lot of window dressing to get to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I requested the submitted bids for the Medicaid managed care, and I got all 7 of the bids, and I had time to glance at one of them. It was 1,600 pages, what Blue Cross Blue Shield, pitched to the healthcare authority, and I was like, who has time for this? Anyway.
Well, you can hope that the healthcare authority has people that, it's a whole different language. It truly is, in all fairness. But they've got the people with the expertise to hopefully get through that and be able to tell us what it really says. I'm an attorney. I know what it's like to read a complicated contract and then try to explain it to somebody. But I also know that you've got to give us the facts before we can make the decisions we need to make. This is just too big of a project. It's too big of a policy shift, and it's just too expensive to not get this right. And there's just too many people's lives at stake.
Do you think the legislature should have a larger role in that process?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've said from the beginning that when you've got this has been 12 years in the making, easily 12 years in the making in this state, to try to get Medicaid expansion. And when you're looking at a huge policy shift, that, by the way, was done by the people and not by the legislature, had to be voted on by the people. When you see the will of the people that clearly, and at the same time see that it was almost a 50-50 split, then those of us in the House, those of us in the Senate that actually represent every single individual in this state should have had a place at the table in order to explain our constituents' views and what our constituents wanted, and we did not. So yes, we absolutely should have had a place at the table.
I think that's all mine.
No idea.
I think we're good on questions.
Thanks for your time. You'll have a good weekend.
Thank you, you too.
See you Monday.
Bye-bye.
Bye.